Welcome everybody to Destination Unknown, episode 11. We have Eddie from Viroqua, Wisconsin today. Not only does he have one bookstore, he has two bookstores. He has Driftless Books and he has Metaphysical Graffiti. I'm going to have him introduce himself, talk about both of those stores, and then we're going to get into his history as a bookseller and how the market is nowadays and being a bookseller in Wisconsin. So Eddie, without further ado, we've done this before. Talk to us about your stores.
All right, so I have a big, huge store with probably 500,000 or 1,000,000 books. That's 20,000 square feet, 3 floors, an old tobacco warehouse built 110 years ago. And then another smaller store downtown in our little town of Viroqua, which is 5,000 people. And that store specializes in metaphysics, local history, Wisconsin history, radical revolutionary politics, and homesteading. It also has a big sci-fi, all the paperback sci-fi stuff, and a comic book shop and a vinyl record shop. So it's a really nice old building, once again repurposed for it has a great history. It used to be like a shelter for World War I veterans coming back from the war, like sort of shell-shocked. And then it was always kind of a halfway house because there's 13 rooms upstairs. So there was always kind of marginal guys living there. And there was a cafe downstairs at one point. There's a lot of stories in town about this place. And of course, about the tobacco warehouse.
So 13 rooms upstairs, is it still like that? So you're going to have 13 rooms of books in there?
Well, we're using them as sort of storage office.
Okay.
A few people are renting rooms, an office or two, that kind of thing.
Oh, that's cool. And I think you got into the book game in the early 2000s, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
Can you-
2004.
Take us on that
2004,
journey.
Yeah, so I moved back from California where I had amassed a whole bunch of books. And when I got back, I realized I had to justify this addiction, and I didn't really have a job aside from part-time high school teacher at the Waldorf school. And so I looked into buying more books, and I was living in an old building on the river in this tiny little town down the way from where we are now, and found an eBay auction, basically some contractors who were renovating a huge warehouse came across a whole floor of books that a deceased book dealer in Connecticut had left there and had died 10 years before. His wife didn't pay the rent, and so it was just kind of there and hadn't been touched in 10 or 15 years. A lot of like Yale University library discards, old stuff from just, and I at that point didn't know, and I loved what I knew, but I didn't know anything about value. So we spent about, my lady friend and I at the time spent about a month in this warehouse, living there, pretty much finding pallets and boxes and packing whatever we intuitively felt. And we ended up taking maybe 25%, and that was 2 completely full semi trucks.
Wow.
Which we moved back to Wisconsin and started the journey.
And what happened with everything else that you didn't take?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure.
The next eBay buyer.
Yeah, or they were going to throw it in a dumpster. And one of the guys, said, hey, maybe someone will come and take some of this and save us some money. So it was kind of a gamble, driving out there going, am I going to get killed in this deal, or am I going to find the rest of my life, which I ended up doing.
You found the rest of your life. And back then, with you and her living there and culling the books together, how were you deciding on which books to take? Were you researching them as you went, or just going with interesting titles?
Yeah, basically it was when we were there packing, we just had to go intuitively, and we didn't have time to look anything up. It was literally like, don't even open the book. just either put it aside in the pile and I'll come
Right.
around to get the pile, or it was kind of madness. And, it funded the whole business for a long time, until the next collection came. And yeah.
And do you think you still have some of those books still on the shelves of your stores now, or has that collection been completely sold out?
No, no, there's things that sell all the time that I can kind of identify by various means, oh, that's the bookseller's pencil, or
Yeah.
it's a Yale University thing. And there's also, probably a pallet or two in the basement that I haven't even got to, because what happened was we moved to this little town of Viola, and it was a huge building, and we were in 3/4 of the downstairs, and the post office for the town was in the other quarter of the downstairs. So we got to cannibalize a whole bunch of space with shelves, and basically when we moved the stuff in, you couldn't even move in this space. So we went from that to having kind of a fully functional bookstore in about a year, unpacking wise, slowly cataloging things, slowly selling things on eBay. But then we had a flood, and there was a foot and a half of water in the store, and
Mhm.
there was a tornado, and that took out like part of the back of the building. We ended up moving to this space where we are now, the big
Right.
tobacco warehouse, in about 2008.
Okay, so there was a 4-year time where you were selling on eBay, selling as a physical bookstore. And I know we talked a little bit about getting into it. Here's this eBay ad with 50,000, 100,000 books. What was there an impetus in you? Was there something in you that said I'm going to be a bookman, I'm going to be a bookseller? Because as booksellers, we all have that feeling that we know books, that we like to be around books. Did you have that back then?
Yeah, since I was a kid, going in bookstores were just magical experiences.
Right,
And I suppose in my heart of hearts, I always, that was the dream. If you could only have a whole building full of books and
right.
sell them to people. And so, yeah, when I did it, I realized, like, this is not a little thing. This is the rest of your life. You can't really get out of this,
Mhm.
2 semi trucks full of books. So it just kept kind of expanding since then, and all the indicators worked. You know what I mean? Like, our online presence was enough to kind of pay the bills, and then we opened the doors, and then we started doing music shows, and of course poetry readings, and being more of what we wanted to be, which was the center or a community center
Yeah.
that things could take place in.
Yeah, yeah. Would you mind getting more into that? Because I know music is a big part of your life. I know you've had bands perform live in the Driftless Books bookstore. Can you talk a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, initially when we got the big warehouse, some of the local musicians said, hey, what a great space, because we hadn't completely filled it yet with books, although mostly. And they wanted to do some shows, so we started saying, sure, let's do a little show. And then we did a weekly radio show, live on the air on our community radio station, which is about the same age as the bookstore. We started it back about then, and it's a vibrant, fully community funded FM station. And we did a live barn dance and sort of variety music show every week. And that was awesome. And that just kind of started spreading the idea of, this is a beautiful place.
Right.
Everybody would say, the room sounded so nice. Like, they played in hundreds of places, but this room with the books and the wood and the bricks and the angles and the absorption, I don't know, I'm not a sound engineer, but they all loved it. So we started doing shows, and over the years we peaked about 2008, maybe, or no, I mean 2018,
Okay.
when we did, I think, over 100 events and shows. We kind of just said yes to everybody, and that cost a whole bunch of money. It wasn't, we weren't making any money on these deals. We wanted to show the bands a good time. We wanted to show the community a good time. And so since then, we've been able to pick more, of our style, a little more Americana, a little more folk. No one's plugging in and making a lot of noise. There's meaning behind the songs. These songwriters are, people that have you know, stories, and we
Right.
want the stories to kind of come through in these performances. And the rest can play at the bars, right? So
And
we've been really
how big
lucky that way.
how big of a venue is the bookstore? How many
Well, at
people
one point we could
fit?
get 120 chairs in at one point. Now we can do about 50 chairs. So you could still fit 75, 100 people in there if you needed to.
No more book
And
buying,
sometimes it
Eddie.
happens that way, but it's it's more of an intimate thing for maybe 40 people. You know what I
Right.
mean?
No,
And
yeah,
musicians,
no more book buying for you. No more book buying. We need the venue. We need the chairs. You just keep filling shelves in there with books, and the venue gets smaller and smaller.
yeah, and the shelves get higher. Now we're up to the ceiling. These Amish
Right.
guys will come in and for a couple grand, they'll put up a whole section of floor to ceiling,
Wow.
both sides, so you can really expand your space
Mhm.
up and, create sort of different intimate nooks there
Right.
in the big open space.
That's so interesting. And are you still, I mean, I know you're probably not doing 100 shows a year now, but are you still doing it on a regular basis? Because I know that takes a lot of time.
Yeah, we are. We're doing about, maybe one a week or two or three a month. We're down to that. And I'm being really selective. And a lot of times it's bands and artists that have come through already that we feel a sort of affinity with,
Mhm.
um, or local bands. And, when someone comes through, you can always get the local people to open and everybody's much happier. But we've developed a whole music scene here now where we now have outdoor street concerts. Well, we used to at both venues, but now it's just the downtown venue where we and have a big stage. And the community funds this, so it's free. And we do that every other Saturday.
Right.
And then there's music in the county parks. So that's every Wednesday. So there's like a lot of free music going on, plus a couple of the other places I've started to do, so we can scale back and be more selective.
Yeah, I know in talking to you prior that community is a huge part of what you love about the book business too. That in your perfect world, it would just be books and music and the entire town and arts and crafts and everything. Where does that stem from? That
Well,
that
the whole
that
idea of
desire. Yeah.
yeah, the book village, that like Hay on Wye is the perfect example
Mhm.
in England. Um and it never really caught on in the United States. There's Hobart, that's sort of a book village out in New York, and there's a little bit of a, impetus somewhere, but not really anything serious. And so, you know, that's the ultimate idea, is to have a whole little town full of tiny little bookshops that represent the whole collection as it stands. I mean, right now we're sitting on probably 50,000 nice mysteries, like hardcovers from
Mhm.
Serendipity and in Berkeley, and
Right.
from Larry McMurtry's auction, and from a couple other bookstores bought out, that we just don't have any space for mysteries. So they keep getting on pallets and going to the other warehouse. And but we just don't have the space to do it. But it would be a perfect sort of little micro thing. Unfortunately, real estate has gotten real expensive in our
Mhm.
little tiny town of
Right.
5,000. So yeah, there's not a lot of empty buildings to take over.
But in the future or in a vision you have, you could see yourself having a store of sort of the mystery and thriller genre as well.
Yeah, that and the antique children's bookstore, and there's the antiquarian store, stuff that we're not able to all have downstairs in the main space, that is very sellable, but you only can go through a certain amount of books a day. We all know that.
Yeah.
So you can
24
take in
24 hours.
hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. That's
Yeah.
not a problem. They just show up.
Yeah.
Uh,
Sometimes it's
but
thousands
to
and
deal with
thousands,
them,
Eddie. Sometimes it's thousands.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. It's,
Oh,
the way your beautiful vision is, it's almost like a tourist spot for the book lover, though, that people would want to come to the book village as a destination for vacation because they're book lovers.
yeah, so that's actually happening. Most of our business during the summer months and during the regular season is people from out of town who are specifically coming for the bookstore, but they're pairing it with all the other awesome things in the area, like canoes and hiking and the slow food movement and the restaurants that are like farm to table and maybe the Amish community or
Right.
so there's there's enough stuff in this charming little town, um, to bring people in. But I'm just surprised at how far people will drive just for the experience of a real bookstore.
Yeah.
And they seem to all be very happy when they leave. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we're not pulling the wool over anybody's eyes here. It's like you get the experience, and um, it's a beautiful experience that you don't get to see much, and certainly in a larger space.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
unfortunately, people, yeah, the rents in the cities and the smallness of the spaces, and we could talk about the ecology of books
Right.
as I see it.
But the world has changed so much, especially
Which is
post COVID. It's changed so much, and many booksellers went out of business. And you have remained standing and thriving in your business. Do you attribute that also to the internet, Amazon, eBay? How much of that do you do in your business?
Well, we have about 40,000 things up on eBay. I mean on Amazon, and about 1,000 on eBay. So we keep that going. I hate Amazon. I think it's the worst possible manifestation of a corporation, and especially as it deals with books. Um, I challenged Jeff Bezos to a duel, and he didn't respond. For control of the books, because they've ruined it. They've ruined the ecology of the stores in the beginning, and now with the online thing, it's just a nightmare. And to try to actually resolve something or have some, yeah, there's a million things we could rant about how horrible
Yeah.
Amazon is, especially as you get into more specialty stuff, the older stuff, the antiquarian stuff. It's like you're an idiot to try to even list it there because you know they've engineered the game so that what the customer sees is a cheap reprint from India that they do, so it's, and they won't even allow you to list the old books, even if there's, so, but it is necessarily our bread and butter. And that's because we had a software meltdown some years ago, maybe like 8 years ago. We had a great piece of software called Kazam, which did everything you'd want. It was cloud based and it was smart and it was new and hip. And this kid from MIT used it for the first maybe 10 years. And then it just disappeared like that. So we were and only put it on one thing. And then I realized there's no real good software for booksellers, anything that's like 21st century at all. It's all Windows based, none of it's cloud based. It's just clunky and old, and for a new bookstore, great. You got all your bells and whistles, but for an antiquarian, no
Right.
way.
Yeah.
And so, my vision is to try to see a place where, in a cooperative sense, of all these booksellers and players like libraries and customers and authors and publishers, we can somehow come together and use like AI to like make all that shit
Yeah.
better, right? Even the OCLC, the WorldCat, and the library system software is, there's hundreds of variations and things that, it sort of contains everything, but it's not been whittled down to all books. We have no complete list of all books, at least digitally, that we can easily access. So in a perfect world, that's what I'd love to see.
Right. So you have your walk-in customers, you have your Amazon, you have your eBay. Behind the scenes, behind the curtain of your business, how do you decide an eBay book and an Amazon book?
Well, the Amazon book is going to be something that's, at least 15, $20 maybe.
Okay.
Sometimes we go down to 10
Mhm.
price, like we're the lowest one. We don't use any automatic pricing software, so it's just the way it is. And that's been real good. And then for eBay, it's a lot of the time like things you can't list on Amazon. There's no place for it. They won't let you create a new thing for this, 1750 sermon or whatever it is. And it's just the only place other than that to. We're done catalogs. I should be doing that kind of stuff. We don't even have our books listed on our website. You know what I mean? Because the translation from an Amazon inventory to happen, right? So you're sort of restricted in what you can do, but the machine still keeps working for all the people that, the couple people we have cataloging on a daily basis.
So
Yeah.
a lot of booksellers, will watch this interview, and a lot of them will be selling on Amazon. So you don't use every pricer. So the price that you choose for the book, that's the price that sticks on in the Amazon market.
Yeah, and I'm sure we've, shot ourselves in the foot for many years and not repricing things
Right.
because the market changes and people come in with new copies. Yeah, but at this point I can't see. I've heard too many horror stories about sort of automatic pricing and, so we don't do any FBA or whatever that's called where you ship your
Okay.
books off to Amazon or anything like that.
Right. So
Um,
you're
we
doing
just
all
try to
merchant
like,
fulfilled. Yeah. I got you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so every day I spend, behind the curtain at least an hour and a half, maybe two, packaging everything. There's 10 or 20 orders every day between the two. Um, and sometimes it's $10 books and sometimes it's $150 books and it works, right? But could it expand? Sure, but how knowledge and
Right.
book knowledge, we try to at least describe the thing as accurately as we can.
Right.
We're not bibliographers by trade. We didn't go to Harvard to
Right.
study library science. But we know that you should list the publisher and the date and the print, like these are essential to,
Right.
things. How it translates into Amazon is anybody's guess. I think people buy books just blind, when they're
They're
buying.
getting
But we also have a lot of.
they're getting a stock photo on Amazon, and with eBay, they're getting multiple pictures, hopefully, very good pictures, hopefully. Yeah.
Well,
So
and there you go. Yeah, exactly. That's one of the better selling tools of eBay, obviously.
yeah. And what do you think about the newer platforms? Like, are you familiar with Whatnot?
Closely since the beginning.
Mhm.
Um, I think I did one or two auctions that the first one had technical stuff and the second one no one came to. And I'm like, you know, I can see myself doing it in the future, like maybe doing it a lot.
Right.
Um, I don't like being on camera. So, but I think it's the better medium,
Right. Well,
all those
yeah,
mediums
when,
for
when,
certain
yeah.
things. If you
when,
can, if you can
sorry,
put together the audience.
yeah, when you're ready, you can call me, and I will give you private lessons on Whatnot. I'm doing about 4 shows a week now. It's been wildly successful,
Mhm.
and I will train you or your staff anytime you're ready. And
Yeah,
you do not have to be on camera, Eddie. You can have your hands on camera.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's an awesome medium for this whole book selling thing. I really do. They've 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 captured something. If we can get enough booksellers, book buyers to be
Yeah,
there, there's certain genres that seem to work a lot better.
right.
Uh, Old and antiquarian, maybe not so much. Um, so it's more, yeah, I think it's a great tool. Same with, we don't do Instagram, we don't do
Mm,
TikTok. We did a couple TikTok videos, Um, we don't sell on those other mediums.
right.
I would love to have someone who's hot with those mediums, but I'm, an old Gen Xer, and I'm way more into the artifact than the digital copy and the, you know, selling yourself. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Could you see
Um,
yourself in the future sort of maybe hiring someone for all of the social media and expanding that way?
yeah, for sure. And because I taught high school for so long in this town, and there's so many young kids who grew up in the bookstore that go off to college and come back. There's a lot of it's just waiting for the right person, sort of with the right sparkle in their eye. I don't want to hire someone to just click the boxes,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So eventually it'll happen. I think with all these things, if you don't have to do it and you're not stressing about it, that's fine for right now. I know what they are, and I know the potential, and you know, yeah, I would love to do more of it.
I'm gonna work on you behind the scenes. I'm gonna work on you. And now what about sourcing? I know I believe last time we spoke, you talked about you people donate books all the time to you. And so sourcing is a little bit different for you.
Yeah, because I guess we have the open door policy, or the open loading dock policy, where the loading dock doors open, and everybody knows you can kind of drop off books if they're a donation. So every day we get boxes dropped off from someone or else. Now, a lot of people want store credit, a
Right.
few people want cash, and it's really that. And those people, you can easily work with. Like, we had a book dealer from a bookstore 50 miles away that came in, with a whole bunch of stuff that she didn't have space for or wasn't comfortable selling, some photography that was a little edgy, and yeah, didn't want to deal with it. But I'm like, oh yeah, that's $100 book. That's $100 book. We've sold them before, and they sell quickly. We'll give you a couple $100 for the
Right.
4 boxes. She was happy. We kind of got our money back in a couple days, got rid of the stuff we'd rather not have at the store, and have a bunch of great stock, of good photography books.
Right. Yeah. So are you still taking house calls though? If someone calls you, or are you being very specific about your time and a lot of people in my Paper Gold Patreon group that they're out there trying to source all the time. So any type of sourcing information is always good for them. Um, are you very specific about where you go and when you go, or do you go to a lot of calls, you know, without much knowledge of what the collection is?
Yeah, so if they call me, I will almost always go, but we're talking about a 30-mile, 50-mile radius. Um, if it's longer than that, or collections in the city, you can easily suss out whether it's a bunch of romances and westerns, or whether this was a professor who
Right.
or a collector.
Great point.
So I'll, like, I just got a call today. Someone's mother got put in the nursing home. She had books all her life. She used to collect antiques, so it's like, I had an antique shop, and she said there's Grisham and JD Robb, and I'm like, but then I'm like, there's antiques. Sure, I'll go. It's 10 minutes break. Something, you know what I mean? There's always something. So I think it's in my sense, it's worth my time, um, because partly it's a break from being in the shop,
Right.
and I don't have to close the store to do that. And you get to meet people, and you know part of my what I see as a mission in this whole thing, if we were a nonprofit or a whatever, be to really save books, because that's the part of the ecosystem that's broken down in
Right.
terms of libraries and bookstores. They no longer will say yes when all those people call that want to get rid of their books, because there's no space, because the Friends of the Library group is no longer in service or
Mm.
whatever. And that's the big problem. I think, we really are destroying a huge amount of our history without anyone realizing it. And that's the real god awful truth,
Yeah.
even
How do we,
though we all have tons of books to deal with.
how do we as a community of booksellers begin to fix that problem?
Well, I think it's the network and the working cooperatively. So the lady down the road, if she gets a call, she'll call me.
Right.
And if I can't handle it, is there someone that I can call? And I think kind of like if there were regional hubs in this imaginary cooperative where all this stuff, innovative book dealers and tech people that want to like get into the game can live there in the shopping mall full of 10 million books, and
Right.
everybody can have a store for 6 months, and then we'll fund you to buy the building in your hometown so you can start your store and give you inventory and start you off. That should be happening to save these books. It's not like we have to go buy those books. Like, they will come. Every library in the country would love to say
Right.
yes
Yeah.
and like take a few and send them off next week, but they don't have the space and there's no network. So I think it's a doable thing. I think just, booksellers are poor people by and large.
Right.
And I think it would really take someone to take that idea seriously.
Right.
Like, we need to save the books. Not every
Well,
John Grisham book,
right.
but
Yeah. It's interesting you say that though, because I have a very large consignment business nationally, and I work with at least 8 friends of the libraries across the country who will send me pictures of books they think fit for me to sell for them. And as you say, it could be more local. It doesn't have to be a friend of the library in Arizona contacting me in Florida. It should be more local, but it's not. I did recognize a hole in the system where friends of the libraries across the country were getting great books in all the time as donation. And a lot of times they don't do the research. They price them at $1 or they have a book sale. And it could be very local to be able to gather these books and, as you say, save the history that we are definitely throwing away.
yeah, it's a larger context. And there's the digital realm and how many of these are being scanned and
Right.
preserved, at least for that. I mean, Google, like, when they scan their stuff, which you can't even access because of all the copyright nut cases, um, they destroyed the books. They guillotined the spines and scanned them. That was their machine
Mhm.
that, had to do that. So all those books ended up in the dumpsters. Like, okay, great. Humanity has a digital copy. Thank you. But
Yeah, yeah,
whereas the Internet Archive, which I think are the heroes in this story, they actually like have invented scanners where you turn the page and the thing comes down and it goes up and you preserve the book.
right.
Um, it's not rocket science, but Google
Right.
couldn't figure it out.
Well, Google was also paying people by the hour to destroy those books, and that makes no sense either. You have to feed the machine that destroys the spine.
And a
So
lot of institutions.
yeah,
Yeah.
it makes no sense. Now, I'm a big believer as a former high school teacher myself, who retired after 18 years and did this full time. Great books are still everywhere. They're everywhere to be found. And you can definitely make a solid living as a bookseller, whether you have a physical location like you do or you work out of your home like I do. But I just think that the books are still everywhere.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. You just goes.
So I know you a little bit. We've talked before. What about you and your personal taste of books, your favorite subjects, the things you know you can never sell. What is that flavor of the book?
Yeah, for me, I kind of fell into the rabbit hole of Shakespeare
Okay.
and the authorship of Shakespeare. So I'm a proponent of the Oxfordian theory, which is that the 17th Earl of Oxford, Edward de Vere, was the guy behind most of not only Shakespeare but the entire English literary Renaissance, funding it, printing, theater companies, the whole bit. And for some reason, he got erased. Anyway, it's a fascinating mystery. It's a safe conspiracy. The FBI isn't going to come knock on your door because you're reading about this. But it also opens you up to all Shakespeare scholarship and sort of looking at it through a very different, interesting lens. So you can read some of the works from the 40s and the lit crit folks really deep diving into the text and realize what they knew at that point was different than what we know now about who Shakespeare was, or what the times were, or what the printing of that particular thing was. So it's an endless chasm of reading, which I really love.
And
And
how did
people
that
are
evolve?
publishing on it.
Yeah, how did that evolve?
Well, it was interesting. A friend of mine by the name of Peter Lamborn Wilson, who he's a writer, and he writes under the name Hakeem Bey also. Um, uh, Philosopher, anarchist, utopian theorist. Anyway, his father, who was a professor at Dartmouth and Yale and was actually head of the collected Emerson project at Harvard, publishing all those books. He had one of those machines in his house that you could look at two copies of like the first folio and
Okay.
look through these lenses, and it would collate, so you could see very minute printing errors, right? He was that much of a geek on Shakespeare. He died, and Peter, who never has driven and is kind of a Luddite, said, "Would you go down and get his books? You can have them." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll clean out the house too, so the realtor can just move it and, bring you a bunch of the personal stuff." And it worked out great. He happened to have this massive collection of Shakespeare. So I started reading it, and then I thought, well, I should probably try to sell some of this collection because at that point it was one of the bigger collections I had.
Mm.
And so I looked for Shakespeare festival or conferences, right,
Okay.
where I could go and sell these used Shakespeare books. I thought, what no brainer. Well, all the Shakespeare conferences said, no, we don't do that kind of thing. Are you crazy?
No,
Except
no
for
vision, Eddie. No vision. They had no vision.
Well, except for these, like, conspiracy theorists, right? Who were like, no, we believe this other guy wrote it. And I'm like, great. And I brought the books and they loved it. And I kind of went down the rabbit hole. And I go back every year with a whole bunch of books. And it's just a great time. It's a little tribe, a little literary tribe of
Mm.
kind of heretics. And I love that. So I read a lot about that. I've been reading a lot around the idea of Arkham House and August Derleth,
Mm.
right? Lovecraft and all that stuff, because Derleth and Arkham House was right down the road, maybe an hour. And yeah, let's just say I came across a collection that I have to make a decision in the next 24 hours whether to buy it or not. But it's basically, how, I don't know what your interest in collecting is, but you always imagine this sort of legendary stash, right? Like around here, I'm like, oh, Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
Yeah, some garage has like all boxes of the first printings of all this stuff. Like, it's got to exist. And I thought the same thing about Arkham House because it's so collectible. And I sort of found one of those collections, and so it's pretty interesting. And the history of that whole operation as a small press,
Right.
bringing Lovecraft's work and like introducing Bradbury and Clark Oz, just so many
Yeah.
writers.
The
Yeah.
camp. Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. So you have to make a decision in 24 hours to buy this holy grail of an Arkham House collection. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. And it's a big number. And
How
yeah,
many
I'm
how
just
many
kind
volumes? Don't tell me the number, but how many volumes?
of how many volumes? Like 400 pristine first printings. Yeah,
I think it's
yeah.
gonna be hard for you to say no, isn't it?
It's gonna be hard. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. We'll
because
see.
yeah, you don't it's getting harder and harder to find Arkham House,
Yeah.
especially with the ones with the dust jackets in pristine condition. That's I
Well, and
don't envy you.
the market's gone down a bit. You know,
Mhm.
there's more than there was in the system, but the prices have, they're not
Right,
going down,
right.
right? Um, so yeah, it's plus there's a lot of auxiliary derelict stuff, unpublished stuff, and his scope was just unbelievable. You know, he published over 100 books, um, 1,000 at least articles and stories in the old pulp
Yeah,
magazines.
I was gonna
Um,
ask you about that. Are there pulps in this collection as well?
yeah, yeah, a lot of them,
That's
and
wonderful.
correspondence and da 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 da, and unpublished stuff. Luckily the derelicts archives went to most of it went to the Wisconsin Historical Society.
Mhm.
And most of it's available. There are a number of boxes which are sealed for I think another 20 years or something with all the secret love letters and
Yeah, yeah.
such.
Those biographies will come out years from now. That's so interesting.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, you got 24 hours on that. So I'm gonna ask you a couple more questions and then let you have your dinner. With metaphysical graffiti, how do you divide your time between these two fantastic stores physically?
Um, well, my goal is to get to the place where I don't have to deal with anything,
Okay.
and I can do the things like buy books and like actually, and I get to do that. I don't have to run either of the shops at any given time, but every day I have to bring boxes to one place to catalog, pick up the catalog stuff, bring it back to the warehouse, bring it up the elevator to upstairs, put it, that's an endless dance. And parsing through and mining all the stuff that comes in, that's the big dance. And then kind of like being okay with like the 20 years of shit you haven't dealt with, that you're staring at and tripping over every day. um that's a big part of it too. So every day I'm kind of both places. um and we only do new books that are of interest to us and local, basically local authors or local presses. And so we don't have that whole, the inventory nightmare and having to like spend so much time on, we can kind of just flood the areas with stuff. And when it dissipates enough, you can put in some more, right? In each of these sections in both of
Right.
the stores.
I'm guessing you don't have a death pile. You have a reincarnation times 100 pile.
Yeah, a warehouse of a reincarnation. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
crazy.
And we've also been, the other thing I wanted to mention, we've also been publishing. This is our newest
Okay.
book. It's a songbook by Wisconsin or Iowa songwriter Greg Brown, who's pretty legendary from the 70s, 80s into the, now he just retired. But this is our eighth or ninth book, so we're by Midwestern musicians.
Okay.
So Charlie Parr, and not only Midwestern musicians, but people in the network. And it's been great, sort of learning about small presses, and how to get rid of 500 copies of a book. But it's also a great thing for the store because you can highlight it and actually sell a bunch and not have to worry about Amazon and
Right.
eBay and the rest. At least for those kind of things.
So they can buy that through you through your store.
Yeah, or a website or Amazon or
Okay.
eBay. They have them.
I'm gonna attach your store link to this interview so they can go right directly to you for this.
Yeah, and the press is called Ramshackle Press. So it's
Yeah.
ramshackle.org.
Okay, I'm gonna put that in there. I'm gonna put that in there for us. So that'll be great. So do you have any advice for the bookseller who works from home? Maybe it's a part-time gig. They do want to ramp it up. They do love books the way you and I love books. You have any advice for them to stretching themselves out into the marketplace and sourcing?
Yeah. Um, I think, imagine like the DIY scene in the 90s, where you actually had to photocopy your flyers and put them on telephone poles. I think there's a little bit of that needs to happen. Like bookseller, the people who need inventory and want to start sourcing things, um, they're in a community. It's a matter of how you interact with that community. I mean, there's Facebook groups, there's telephone poles.
Right.
Um, and there's all kinds of institutions, there's libraries, and so make those relationships happen at your local library, because they're the one that's going to get the first call when grandma dies,
Right.
right? And they probably can't deal with it because it's uh, and places like Goodwill, or even other businesses, some of which that carry books,
Right.
because they will also be the source call that, oh, we can't deal with 10,000 books. And that's what you want. You want the crazy big huge collection that you can mine for years to come, if you
Yeah.
have the space. And if so I think we've got to where we've got is because there were certain risks that were kind of crazy, but actually were good moves in the end. But you had to be a little bit crazy to like.
I like that you say that. Yeah, I like that. You do. You have to take, in order to grow substantially, you do have to take risks and get lucky along the way.
Right. So we're at our, I think, 12th store that we've bought out. Some of them were like Walden Books when it
Right.
was just all the fixtures and the shelves,
Right.
so you got the rolling ladders and the whole deal. But, Serendipity Books in Berkeley, Larry McMurtry's auction where he, dissolved his book village down in Archer City,
Right.
Texas, like the most inhospitable place on earth. But and a few in Wisconsin and around, So I think that's the other thing to keep a hold of is people moving in and out of the business, whether it's old booksellers
Mhm.
or people who are done it from their garage and have to move or having a baby, and there's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is. Thank you for that. Well, I'm going to ask you one famous last question. The name of the show, of course, is Destination Unknown. You've been very kind and considerate to meet with me this evening hour. I never know where I'm going next. I rely on the booksellers I interview to tell me where I'm going. So where are you sending me off to, Eddie?
Well, just down south a ways from where we are, still on the edge of the driftless bioregion, Rockford, Illinois.
Okay.
Okay. Um, Two young folks named Dave and Kim Peterson recently started a bookstore. I think it's less than a year, maybe 2 years
Beautiful.
old. They came up and visited our store, had just the greatest time, bought a bunch of stock. I was happy to like extend him an awesome discount. We had a great time chatting, and like, since there's not a lot of book community around here, at least sellers, and I don't go to the conferences and the antiquarian fairs and all that, I don't have a community of people. So when someone shows up, it's like, my tribe.
Community.
So we struck up a great relationship, and they do social media real well, at least
Okay.
the Facebook stuff and showcasing the stuff that comes in, and they seem to source things great. And they're doing also a lot of music events. They're
Okay.
doing a lot of poetry readings. They're doing silent book club. They're doing all those great things that a community bookstore should be doing.
The name of their
So
store,
they're
Eddie?
called
What is
Maze
Maze?
Books.
Maze. Okay.
Maze, Maze, yeah, in Rockford, Illinois. And
Beautiful.
I'll send you their phone number.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciated my time with you, as I always have had discussions with you. Thank you. Thank you for being so generous And we will have this live on YouTube for you next week. And I'll put all the links in for you along with the publishing of the music songbook. So thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate the time.
Bye, Eddie.
All right.